This is Preston Scott with the Florida Chamber of Commerce and the series on free enterprise. Today's title is Government Employee Pension Reform, and the subject is the Florida retirement system. Joining me on the phone line is Charley Caulkins. He is the managing partner of the Fort Lauderdale office of Fisher and Phillips. Since 1977, he's represented employers nationally in labor and employment law matters. Charley, thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Good morning.
When we talk about pension reform, it's in the news. You see Stockton, California has filed bankruptcy as a city, a large part of that due to pension problems. Why is pension reform so important here in Florida when we're told that everything's fine?
Everything is not fine, Preston. We need to get ourselves in order in this state to maintain our attractiveness to outsiders who want to bring jobs to Florida, as well as providing security to the taxpayers and having an effective retirement program for the employees that work for the public sector in Florida.
One of the things that a lot of people hear is that Florida's retirement system is in great shape. I think the number most frequently used is that it's funded at 87%, and that compared to other pension plans, that's sitting wonderfully well. However, that may be a little misleading.
It sure is. There's two things to look at. One is the state plan, but there's also many cities throughout the state of Florida that have their own plans, plural, with fire, police, and their general employees. And so there are a lot of plans in the state of Florida that are subjecting taxpayers to some significant liabilities if there aren't reforms put in place by our legislature.
Charley, a lot of people out there are uncomfortable with change. Change brings a certain level of discomfort. We all know that. But let's just say everything stands pat. What if the Florida retirement system, FRS as it's known by many, is not reformed? What can taxpayers expect in the years to come?
Well, the taxpayers are going to be hit some way with increased taxes, or there's going to be program funding that's going to have to be cut. This problem will just multiply, just like you mentioned with Stockton, California. There's other cities around the country. There's cities in Florida. I'm in South Florida, and there are a couple of cities in Broward County that we know are in trouble because they have such huge unfunded pension liabilities. So the key here is to try to provide a program that provides the security to our employees that work for the public sector, so when they do retire, they will have something to live on.
I think that it's sometimes it's stated often, this particular issue that I want to raise, but Charley, a lot of people don't understand the nuanced difference between defined benefit and defined contribution. Explain the difference.
Well, a defined benefit is a promise to the retirees that when they retire, they're going to get a certain dollar amount, plus usually health care as well for themselves and their spouse for the rest of their life. The defined contribution is a program set up where the employees can have some of their money put into a retirement plan, and their employer can match that or provide even more than a match. This is a very common used retirement tool in the private sector, and it's one throughout the country that public sector entities are looking at, and this is the way to go so that the private and public sectors are aligned for creating a program for retirement.
Charley, I'm not an expert on this, but on the surface, it would seem to me that when you get to defined benefit, the risk falls on the taxpayer. On defined contribution, it's like any other investment. When you invest, there's a degree of risk involved, but defined contribution, that risk belongs to the investor, i.e. the individual person. Is that the exposure here that we're talking about with defined benefit?
Well, that certainly is part of it, and there is a plus with the defined contribution as well, which is if the employee decides to leave and go to another employer, not even in the public sector, let's say goes to a private sector, they get to take that account with them and then continue to multiply it as they put more money into it. And it does give the individual the ability to control their own destiny and create what retirement program fits for them. The state and the other public sector programs are more generalized, and the retirees are relying on the government, which ultimately is relying on the taxpayer. The taxpayers in Florida need, and the public sector employees need to know that the real thing that needs to be done right now is to maintain the security of those programs. You can't just rely on the taxpayer of the future. That's what's happened in a couple places outside the state of Florida where we're seeing these bankruptcies. Chicago has a huge problem, billions of dollars underfunded, We don't need to get Florida in that position, so we need to take action now. Our legislature needs to go in and make sure we have proper reforms so that we have a good, solid future for our retirees that work in our public sector in the state of Florida and protect the taxpayers at the same time.
And that's one of the sad ironies, Charlie, is that it can reach a crisis point where you can't even provide the benefits that you truly do want to provide those state workers that have given their lives to serving the state.
That's right. If something's not done, and when push comes to shove, it could be the retirees who have been planning their whole retirement on a certain amount of money and have that swept out from under them if we don't get a reform done soon in the state of Florida.
How does Florida, last question I have for you today, how does Florida's pension compare to, say, other states?
Well, Florida's pension has actually been better until recently, and when they required legislature last session put in a 3% requirement to have the employees pay 3% of their salary into the retirement program. Before that, it was 100% funded by the state. Nobody else in the country had that. So there was a reform that was put in place last year. It was challenged in court. The Supreme Court has now said that's a valid thing to do. It's common in private sector, and now it's in the public sector. So I would say that the state program now is moving into the realm of what other states generally have. Charley
Caulkins with Fisher and Phillips. Thank you, sir, for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. It's part of a continuing series on free enterprise with the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Today, employee pension reform. I'm Preston Scott. Thanks for joining us.